because we're about to turn the batshit crazy meter up to 11 as we take a deep dive into the most insane shared worldview you'll ever hear. For the sake of brevity, I just want to focus on the overlapping accounts of a sample of 6 specific individuals. 6 whistleblowers who will serve as our guides to the bottom of an extremely freaky rabbit hole. And if it makes you stomach what's to come any easier, nothing you're about to hear is at all true. And with that said, let's bring on the crazy. First, a brief introduction. First up is William Tompkins, a real person with a detailed paper trail proving he is who he says he is. As a very bright child growing up in Southern California just before the Second World War, Tompkins attracted the attention of the U.S. Navy for creating models of Navy ships from memory that were so detailed that they included a number of then classified features that the Navy didn't want known to the public. Tompkins was able to use his model building abilities to land a job with one of the U.S.'s largest aerospace corporations. And that's when things began to get weird.
I'm in there for only 4 weeks, and they put me into a secret lab.
This think tank was tasked with designing hundreds of theoretical military missions that would take place in space, as well as having to design a fleet of spacecraft necessary to carry them out.
The vehicles that we designed for all of these missions are massive. They're like 40 times the size of the little Apollo.
Where Tompkins attracts a lot of controversy is his claim that these military missions and spacecraft did become a reality in a classified space program ran by the Navy called Solar Warden.
It is 8 Navy space battle groups with destroyers, cruisers, all kinds of stuff.
According to Tompkins, he was able to get away with such disclosures with direct approval of the Navy admiral he worked under, who Tompkins believes belongs to a faction of the military elite who wants some of this information disclosed to the public. William Tompkins passed away in 2017 at the age of 94. Our next whistleblower, like William Tompkins, has many verifiable records backing up his identity. His name is Philip Schneider. Schneider was the son of a distinguished U.S. Naval Intelligence Captain, Otto Oscar Schneider, who was instrumental in the design of nuclear submarines and helped the military test nuclear weapons in the South Pacific during the 40s. Phil was also a very bright child, who eventually became a geological scientist and structural engineer, and according to his claims, worked in the construction of very large underground military facilities. However, it's his claim that he worked on one particular underground base that would make him famous.
I was involved in something very controversial in building another base inside of Dulce, New Mexico, which is Los Alamos Laboratory. We built an underground facility, a better part of 3 cubic miles hollowed out underground.
Phil claims that in 1979, while excavating the base under Dulce, he was lowered into a cavern to check on some malfunctioning equipment when he then stumbled upon a large active alien base within the Earth.
The large alien grays had been encamped there for as best as believed possible about 400 or 500 years. The stench was worse than the worst garbage can you can imagine. The entity was absolutely horrible. I didn't waste any time. I reached for my pistol. Well, that's when all the hell broke loose, really. All I remember is that he just kind of waved his hand in front of his chest, and the next thing I know, this blue beam hit me and just literally opened me up like a fish.
Schneider says he was saved by a Green Beret who ended up dying in the conflict. Whether you believe Phil or not, it does seem that he sustained permanent physical and psychological injuries. Here you can hear Cynthia Dreyer, the woman that he would marry years later, describe the damage Phil had suffered.
He did Dulce, New Mexico, where he was shot in the chest, and he had his leg bandaged from top to bottom. His memory is like totally lost as to what he did before. It wasn't until after we got married and stopped taking the medications he was taking when I first met him that he started to remember all of the things.
I'm breaking the law. I'm breaking world as well as federal law, coming out and even talking about this to a group of people. I love my country more than I love my life.
So, how was Phil able to get away with revealing such stunning top-secret information? Well, in 1996, Philip Schneider was found dead in his apartment with a rubber hose tied around his neck. His death was ruled a suicide by local authorities. If our next whistleblower's name sounds familiar, that's because she's the great-granddaughter of the 34th U.S. President, Dwight D. Eisenhower. Now, I'm guessing this great-granddaughter Laura was kind of the black sheep of the Eisenhower family, especially after she went public to claim that there's an attempt by a secret shadowy group to recruit her to live on Mars.
In 2006, I was recruited to go off planet, and there was a lot of manipulation connected to it, so it wasn't, you know, like a nice invitation done with respect. It had a lot to do with, you know, control.
That control came in the form of a man she was romantically and emotionally involved with, whom she believes was sent to recruit her.
I would research, and the names of the people that he was directly interfacing with, they had these cover careers and they were well respected in their field. After I told him I was not going to go on, and he basically put it in the words of, you know, they're going to kidnap you. But he tried to kind of soften it so I wouldn't get all panicked.
Now, why would anyone want to go to Mars? Well, according to her, breakaway factions of the US military-industrial complex are actually way more advanced in space travel than what is made public, and that we've actually had a colony on Mars for decades.
What are we talking about here? You're saying that there's actually a human colony that's been on Mars that's
People
existing now, not in the future, now.
Yeah, existing now.
Laura is also convinced that much of the technology that secretly got us to Mars was in part because her great-grandfather made treaties with an alien race known as the Greys. She also believes the handling of this extraterrestrial information was taken out of her great-grandfather's hands and placed in the control of uber-governmental organizations, some with not very positive intentions.
Eisenhower didn't trust them, and so set up a unit in the U.S. Marine Corps, and he also warned us in his final speech.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence by the military-industrial complex.
We need to understand what this agenda is about, because it's connected to, you know, ET government treaties and some of the things that were discussed in the 1950s, actually. So it goes on and on. If people really want to find out more, you need to Google people like Captain K. His real name is Randy Kramer.
Which brings us to our next whistleblower, Randy Kramer. Randy claims that he's a super soldier, a Marine to be exact, from the very same Marine Corps Special Sections unit that Laura Eisenhower says was set up by her great-grandfather. And he was then subjected to rather unusual forms of training and unusual missions.
The project was called Project Moonshot. It was trying to not use trauma-based mind control. It was an attempt to create augmented soldiers without having to break them 100 times to make us more durable, because breaking soldiers again and again using trauma-based mind control makes them fragile.
So why should we believe him?
Impersonating an officer is a felony. Lying about duty stations or defrauding the public is a felony, and certainly the Marine Corps would give a crap, and I've been doing this for almost 3 years, and I haven't heard a word from them. If I were misrepresenting myself or lying, I would be committing a number of felonies.
That's an interesting point to keep in mind. That's because Randy claims that he spent 17 years of active duty defending the colony on Mars as part of an elite outfit. So why would such a colony need military protection? Well, according to Randy, Mars is home to two main intelligent species. A group called the Mantids that he describes as being similar to ants and operated on a hive mind, and a group of intelligent reptoids.
My understanding is the indigenous insectoids arrived there some hundreds of thousands of years ago, so they've been there for a really, really long time, but they're not evolved from there. But the reptoids are an evolved species that evolved from lesser rock lizards.
Kramer goes on to describe how the two species were once in bitter conflict over domination of the planet, which used to be full of life and very similar to Earth. That is until a large nuclear-type weapon destroyed the planet, blowing its atmosphere and most of its water into space, and leaving its survivors in a near-primitive state. And despite such destruction, he says the planet is teeming with biological life.
The equatorial region, which I've only been to a couple of times, has some bigger animals. But where we were, which was much farther north, everything was very small. So little birds, little lizards, little, burrowing rodents, mammals. But as soon as you get underground, things can get a little bigger.
Sounds crazy, right? His story is outrageous. But there is a trickle of evidence coming from official space agencies that seem to back up some of Randy's claims. Aside from what looks like toppled ruins, space agencies have published photos of structures that very much resemble walls and crashed craft. If these images are genuine, which official agencies don't dispute that they are, then there appears to be a lot going on our closest neighbor that's very intriguing indeed. Now, if Randy Kramer was a secret super soldier who avoided the trauma-based mind control as part of his training, then our next whistleblower was one of those so-called super soldiers who wasn't so lucky. His name is Max Spears. Max claims to have been involved since birth and a subprogram of the Montauk Project. The program, named Project Oak Tree, was tasked to create programmable mind control super soldiers by artificially inducing split personality disorder.
When the mind is fractured through trauma, whether it is sexual trauma, whether it is physical trauma, violence, the mind fractures itself and creates an amnesiac barrier around that so that you don't have to keep reliving the experience over and over again.
If you're taught, you're then able to go inside there and then program a new person to do anything, to do absolutely anything.
This technique, according to Max, has been around since the Egyptians, but was scientifically perfected by the Nazis before the end of World War II, as well as after when their scientists were involved in U.S. military projects. But since its roots are much older, Max says the recruits are often chosen based on their bloodline.
My family goes back for the last certainly 100 years. We're all involved in the occult. On my father's side, he's a descendant from Charlemagne. For these specific bloodlines and these breeding bloodlines, they have to take a child before the age of 3.
And so Max was fucked with royally. But his programming began to break down in his early 30s. Max also says that this type of mind control is common, and that there are many public examples of this programming breaking down over time. Lectures of Max's story are widely available online and are very interesting, not only because of his personal story, but also because some of the strange things he says on a whole slew of topics, such as Colonel Sanders.
The man who was behind KFC, he was also a master programmer, handler, slave handler.
And why you shouldn't eat pork.
The domesticated pig is disturbingly a cross between a human and a wild boar, and consuming it is basically cannibalism in a way.
If you're willing to believe Max, his information is quite explosive. But if he was telling the truth, how was he able to get away with disseminating it to millions? Just before he was scheduled to give a lecture in Poland, Max, at the age of 39, died suddenly in his Warsaw apartment. Max's mother believes that foul play was involved, although authorities refused to investigate any further.
The roads lead all over the place to places that I never ever thought that I would go to, and it's a very mysterious and frightening world that I've stepped into.
Our final whistleblower's name is Alex Collier, and ever since he was a child, he claims to have been in psychic and physical contact with a race of highly evolved and benevolent extraterrestrials, known as the Andromedans.
As far as the Andromedan culture, their society would be approximately 4,700 years more advanced than ours on a spiritual level. On a technological level, they're 50,000 years.
Alex says the Andromedans contacted him because they were not happy with the evolutionary direction that humans were heading. And he wasn't the only one.
There are also other people who are mediums or channels who are also getting information on a spiritual level.
And so Alex was chosen to help elevate humanity's collective consciousness, which is under threat of multiple parasitic races of alien entities that are attempting to dominate us from the shadows. Maybe that's why he's so intense.
You are not coming into my head, you are not taking me over, and you are not going to violate my free will. I don't give a damn who you are. Leave me alone.
Now, it's not these whistleblowers' individual stories that we're going to focus on. Rather, it's how their claimed experiences and personal beliefs fit ever so snugly into a much larger story. Quite possibly the most insane story you'll ever hear. Their combined accounts spin a tale so wild that even if you refuse to believe it, you probably won't forget it. And we're going to start with one of the least controversial assumptions made by these whistleblowers, that the US, and the world as a whole, is littered with large secret underground installations.
Right now, there are 131 active deep underground military bases in the United States.
Underground bases?
Underground bases, sure, yes. But underground world, an entire world.
While Phil's job was to build these bases, William Tompkins claims to have visited secret naval facilities under China Lake, California. Max Spears believes some of his mind control programming took place in underground laboratories. But in general, these bases are used for all sorts of things, from advanced research, human trafficking, and even doomsday shelters for a chosen few. Some of these whistleblowers are even aware of the notorious Dulce base, where Phil Schneider had his unlucky encounter.
That's just an entrance point in and out.
This is Area 51.
This is in New Mexico, Dulce.
And they believe that the completed base is the site of gruesome experiments done with animals, humans, and aliens.
Well, you got under Dulce, you've got the 7 levels under Dulce, where Nightmare Hall, which I think is the 6th level, where they've just put everything you could possibly imagine together, you know, testing out things.
Which brings us to another commonality that these whistleblowers share: a strong conviction that the U.S. and other governments have been working with alien technology, and even with the aliens themselves, for almost a century.
The military's known about the alien question for the better part of 70 years. Of course, remember the Germans did too, the Nazi Germans.
During World War II, Germany was taking extraterrestrial information and putting in production 12, 14 different extraterrestrial type vehicles. 90% of that was taken out of Germany before the war even stopped.
And for this reason, the Allied defeat over Nazism at the end of World War II is actually a huge point of contention for our whistleblowers.
Essentially, World War II had ended. We didn't win. It's just sort of ended.
We didn't win the Second World War as it says in the textbooks. What actually happened is that they went underground and then made it appear that they had lost.
You know, this facade of, you know, winning the war, you know, begins to just take us further and further away from the extraterrestrial concept and what that really means and what it was, you know, what is it really about.
And while the battered German nation surrendered at the end of the war, the Nazi Party never surrendered, and many of their top scientists, military, and intelligence operatives were incorporated, along with their Nazi ideology, deep into the military-industrial complex under Operation Paperclip. This secret Nazi-infiltrated, highly funded national security apparatus came in place just in time, because the late 1940s were not just known for one strange UFO incident, but several. And according to Tompkins, this recovered material was being reverse engineered by the very military and aerospace companies he had worked for. But it wasn't just reverse engineering. Our whistleblowers claim that highly advanced information was given to humanity directly by the aliens.
Eisenhower signed a pact with the known alien species of the time, there were 3 at the time, said that we're going to deal in high technology, but you can take a few head of cattle and a few human beings and you can experiment on them.
We'll give you this technology and you'll have power. And the greed was taking over.
Technology that can take them to the moon, the technology that can take them to Mars, that'll give them the technology to do time travel. They totally sold out a race, our history, everything, for their brief moment in the sun.
And while the public saw rockets and aircraft push the limits of combustion engines, a black world was working on exotic technologies based on electromagnetism, while also keeping much of the world in the dark about what had been achieved. William Tompkins and Mars Marine Randy Kramer claims that this was done primarily through a Navy program called Solar Warden.
Essentially, in the same way that you have an Atlantic fleet and a Pacific fleet, you have the solar system and an imaginary line that divides down the middle, then divides into 2 fleets, which are Solar Warden and Radiant Guardian.
Randy Kramer even thinks that the 2018 creation of the Space Force is just a veiled way to leak some of this technology to the public.
Quote-unquote creation of a Space Force is a fake frontage to a real organization behind it. They can now roll stuff out like it's brand new or we've just been working on it when it's stuff that we've had for a long time.
Now, another strange claim our whistleblowers make is that our moon holds many secrets.
We had launched surveying missions so we could be looking at where we were going to land, and we had seen facilities, ancient facilities on the moon. So we knew there were facilities on the backside. We knew a whole lot that people didn't talk about.
The DMZ on the dark side of the moon has a lot of bases that belong to a lot of different ET species.
It sounds absurd, right? Yet certain objects found in photos from NASA and other space agencies of strange objects that stand out from the lunar surface definitely don't look natural. However, alien bases sound completely tame when compared to this next moon revelation.
What is the moon?
What is the moon? What is the moon? It's not a natural object. Mm-hmm. It's an unnatural object.
Our moon's artificial, completely artificial. It was brought here from Ursa Minor, apparently between 11 and 12,000 years ago.
For the purpose
of being a satellite in a base.
This moon is not a moon. It's not your moon in the first place.
It is older than the Earth. There are ruins all over it. There are bases underneath it. It's everything that we're told it isn't.
And just like out of science fiction comics from the 1950s, our whistleblowers seem fairly confident that Mars colonists from the Shadow government have been battling it out with other alien races for decades.
Mars Attacks?
Mars Attacks.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of truth in that movie.
They use
Trillions of our tax dollars are building these colonies and investing in this corporate conglomerate of, extraterrestrial advanced ET technologies.
We had a human colony there of 300,000, so I'm told. One was underground, one was above ground, Adam and Eve. They're conquered, they're being taken over. The human beings that are from Earth, that volunteered or were kidnapped to go there, are in deep trouble. Many of them have already been eaten, some of them have already been killed. There is nothing we can do here as a race to help them.
Now, if we begin to train all our telescopes on that, are we going to be able to see activity going on there?
I suppose that we would. I have a feeling that they already are seeing incredible amounts of activity, but they're not allowed to say it.
However, if this story sounds completely impossible, part of the reason might be because you learned in school that even if an alien craft moved at nearly impossible speeds, it would still take hundreds, thousands, if not millions of years to get anywhere. So not worth it for our alien neighbors to visit. However, according to our whistleblowers, there's much more to surfing the cosmos than meets the eye.
Can the amplified voice of Ella Fitzgerald shatter this glass? Believe it.
What's interesting about these whistleblowers, and about many in the woo-woo community in general, is an extreme importance placed on vibration.
Everything around you is vibrating energy. Everything around you is vibrating energy. This is not solid. Nothing is solid. It is manifested through geometry, light, sound.
Everything's always vibrating, right? I'm sure it's something that we've all heard one time or another. But how many of us take a moment to think about what that really means? We know we can break down our reality into its most basic forms, like the atom. However, the atom is given its form by energy. Even Einstein once said that all matter is energy, whose vibration has been lowered as to be perceptible by the senses. And it is frequency that holds the informational blueprints to our universe. The structural information present in frequency can create amazing effects on our physical world. You can see here, audio frequency, when aimed at normal sand, can form structures that behave like atoms, or even galaxies. Its effects on water are just another example. Sound, by itself, can even create complex pictures. And if we compare this to the way energy creates everything around us, then we can truly begin to understand how our multidimensional reality really works.
The only experience that is directly available to you is your sensory data. And this sensory data is merely a stream of electrical impulses that stimulates your computing center.
In other words, all that I really know about the outside world is relayed to me through my electrical connection.
Exactly.
Why, that would mean that I really don't know what the outside universe is like at all, for certain.
That's it.
Most of us think of dimensions in terms of height, width, depth, and time being the fourth dimension. However, that's not what I'm talking about. Instead, think of all matters existing within a certain band of frequency, like musical harmonics and octaves. Everything that we could see, touch, or otherwise sense is basically existing in the same limited band of frequency that we're able to perceive. And like musical octaves, these frequency layers can go higher and lower forever. And while our consciousness exists in this dimension, humans too are said to have an unconscious presence in these lower and higher layers of reality, which are often referred to as fourth, fifth, and sixth densities.
Also in fourth density, we all become clairvoyants. We'll be able to see energy fields, see life forms, which means that if you're hiding something, it'll be seen instantaneously.
William Tompkins even believes that various advanced beings have been using this psychic mechanism to communicate with humans.
Probably thousands of people telepathically got information, okay?
Okay.
The bells were rung in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people.
The abilities that they have are latent in everybody. They just haven't lived in a society that has been screwed with like we have been here.
We have dormant and advanced DNA that many don't want us to be in touch with. They have created the control system that we are now in to ensure that we stay limited to a 3D existence.
Interesting theory, huh? But there's no scientific proof that such abilities exist. Or is there? Dr. Rupert Sheldrake out of the UK has spent the better part of his career scientifically proving the existence of what he calls morphic resonance, a metaphysical transmission of information between living creatures that transcends the physical limitations of space and time. Most of Sheldrake's work is often ignored and criticized by the mainstream. However, Sheldrake has provided study after study proving the existence of some form of telepathy in animals and humans. One such experiment had to do with whether or not dogs could sense when their owners would return home. The results are difficult to explain, absent some form of telepathy. However, many experiments with positive results, such as this one, go ignored.
Well, Rupert Sheldrake is a highly credentialed scientist. These ideas were scientific enough, but they were the kind of science that these people don't like. If you were to suggest, as I do, that in altered states of consciousness we may access valuable and useful information, which may be of fundamental importance to humanity, that's a step too far.
And according to Max, the notion of psychic power is just another fact of reality for elite bloodline families at the top of the pyramid. In fact, he believes that this power is how they've been able to retain control of the world for centuries.
They interbreed because they want to make sure that they maintain this particular DNA within their family line, because this particular DNA gives them exalted abilities, gifts, psychic gifts. They have kept the secrets and the cheats for themselves, and they have left the slaves with no understanding of what's going on.
If we are indeed multidimensional life forms, with our souls as the part of us outside the physical body, then what happens when those bodies die? You see, one of the things that these whistleblowers agree on that's rather interesting is that out of all the beliefs about the afterlife that exist, they are all staunch believers in reincarnation.
A lot of people don't believe that they have many lives, okay? Some have more than others. And we've got a whole lot of other stuff we got to do, okay?
Typically, reincarnation is associated with the Hindu religion, but in reality, the three major monotheistic religions where reincarnation is not believed in are the historical minority. The Norse and Druid religions believed in reincarnation, as well as the Sumerians, the Aztecs, the Mayans, Incas, ancient Greeks, and various practitioners of voodoo in West Africa are just some who believed we lived again and again. And the fact that many of us can't remember any of these past lives has halted our development as a species, whereas remembering past lives is common for more advanced life forms, like Alex Collier's Andromedans.
They know what their reincarnational past has been, so they see improvement in themselves life after life after life. We, if we hadn't been so screwed with here, would have the same abilities. But we've been manipulated incredibly on an intense level every day.
And perhaps this ability is still partly present in those who have yet to been exposed to years and years of physical and psychological manipulation. In fact, certain young children are able to recall vivid details of their past lives, a phenomenon with many documented cases. Perhaps none more stunning than the case of James Lanninger, a young man from Louisiana who had a fascination with airplanes since the time he could walk. He was especially interested in aircraft from World War II.
I said, "Oh, look, there's a bomb on the bottom." He said, "That's not a bomb, that's a drop tank."
However, young James was plagued by reoccurring nightmares that caused his parents to worry.
He would wake up in the middle of the night, he'd be laying on his back, kicking his feet up at the ceiling. He would just be crying, and he'd say, "Airplane crash on fire, little man can't get out."
Unable to clearly describe his dreams, James would draw them out, and the scenes always looked like World War II naval and air battles.
Bombing ships, you see men parachuting. Here's another one where planes are dropping bombs.
I'd always asked him, "Do you remember what your name was?" And he always said James. But his name is James. "Do you remember the name of your boat?" He said Natoma.
Some research turned up the USS Natoma Bay, which fought in Iwo Jima. After contacting some of the surviving members of the Natoma crew, they came across this man, James Houston, a pilot who died during the fighting.
A rather large shell just hit him in the engine, and it burst into flames and went down.
James's parents even took him to a reunion of pilots who served on the Natoma, some of whom James was able to recognize by name.
"You're Bob Greenwald." I'm serious.
And he'd never met Bob Greenwald?
No, he'd never met him before.
He even met Houston's sister, Anne.
And he goes, "It's not Anne, it's Annie. She wasn't my oldest sister. I had an older sister than that." And I said, "You did? Who was that?" And he goes, "Ruth. I mean Ruth."
Annie is what they called me when I was little, knowing my name and my sister's name, things that my brother did when he was a kid. It's too amazing to describe how he would feel that way, but he does. He considers me his sister.
Anne was so touched She even gave James items from her brother's final effects.
The real bottom line here is we're all spirit. We contain a soul. That soul is a part of all that is. And that soul has been really trying to be recognized in each of us. And it hasn't been because the real truths of our essence, of our existence, of who we are, having been blinded from us and us being convinced that we're something that we're not, that we're physical, that we're animal form, and we're not. We're spirit. Our spirit animates these physical forms, period.
If we are indeed higher dimensional beings with the ability to exist in this astral realm, then it stands to reason that we're not alone.
The astral realm, which is the 4D, is pretty much taken over.
This was the craziest trip I have ever had in my life.
And nature might provide a way for essentially anyone to come in contact with these entities through the chemical DMT. DMT is produced in the brain by the pineal gland, and it is believed that our brains are flooded with this chemical in the moments before death. The bright light that many report during near-death experiences is widely believed by scientists to be an effect of this compound. DMT is also available as a highly illegal recreational drug, and while science states that its effects are hallucinations of the brain, there's an endless stream of personal testimonials that suggest that what they're experiencing is a shared universe, and filled with entities who are normally filtered out of conscious awareness.
They appear, it's not like they just pop out of nowhere.
There was like 5 of them looking at me.
They had some weird faces. I can't even fucking describe their face.
The thing from The Nightmare Before Christmas with like... And then it like stops.
And waving his finger at me when I tried to look around.
It talks to you. I know it sounds crazy.
Well, the apple might be a little annoyed at this conclusion. It makes a contact with the square from below and sends our flat creature fluttering and spinning.
Ooh, we're scary. These dancing entities that were kind of just dancing around.
Like the little dragon head things, and they doing like this, and then they'll see that I can see them, and they'll go.
At first, the square has no idea what's happening. He's terribly confused. This is utterly outside his experience.
I'm like, what the fuck is these motherfuckers doing?
He comes to realize that he is seeing inside closed rooms in Flatland.
It was like you could see everything and everywhere.
It's like all machine, like...
Weird. It was like melting. I was like going in the world.
He is looking inside his fellow flat creatures.
I can see his neurons. I can see all those energy circles around his eyes.
He is seeing Flatland from a perspective no one has ever seen it before.
Whoa!
Insane, insane. It's insane.
You people have been told total incorrect information from medical, from science, from history, from astronomy, from mathematics, you name it. Everything is incorrect.
I really appreciate you. Yes.
This is a lie.
Oh yeah, there's one more little thing that these whistleblower stories also have in common.
Reptilians.
So reptilians.
The reptilian.
The reptilians. The reptilians.
Reptiles. They're ugly looking lizard, alligator type people.
Come on, we couldn't leave this one out. Reptilians is regarded right up there with Flat Earth when it comes to the bottom of the crackpot conspiracy barrel. A notion that didn't even exist until complete morons were able to learn how to use the internet. However, this one's actually been around a lot longer, and it's almost always tied with a theory known as the Hollow Earth. And while some have taken this literally, a more common and realistic interpretation is that Earth's crust is composed of large open areas, able to support civilizations that can adapt to a life underground.
There are caverns all over this planet which different extraterrestrial civilizations have been using.
There's oceans and forestry and all sorts in the pockets in the inner Earth.
And while proponents of this theory like to point out the abundance of reptile-related imagery found among ancient artworks as evidence for human contact with these beings, skeptics would be quick to point out that man, throughout history, has depicted all sorts of animals in artworks and mythology, like birds, fish, and lions, and in many cases given them human-like characteristics. However, reptiles are far and away the most represented. Nothing else even comes close. Officially, serpent worship goes back 70,000 years with tribes in Botswana. Snakes were also worshipped by the Olmecs in Mexico. Throughout South America, serpents were depicted with feathers, perhaps suggesting that they could fly. An ancient mythology of native Australians teach that humans are created by the dreams of a lizard. Egypt and Sumer also had their reptile deities. And ancient legends and works of art from around the globe clearly depict reptile-type people, such as the Nagas or snake people in India. Even today, snake symbolism is so abundant you hardly notice it, and depictions in pop culture of super smart reptiles are common. And according to my whistleblowers, it's not just one race of these guys, there's several.
There's 6 or 7 types of reptilians that are on this planet. Some snakes, some velociraptor looking, some actually look like dinosaurs.
Mars Marine Randy Kramer also describes encountering natively evolved reptoids on Mars.
If we're either evolved or genetically, altered from primates, they are evolved or genetically altered from, little rock lizards.
So it turns out that if aliens ever show up here on Earth, a new study indicates that they'll probably be more like super intelligent dinosaurs, as smart and as cunning as humans. We would be better off not meeting them.
You see, most of the hubbub regarding the reptilian conspiracy centers around a race of vicious warlike creatures known as the Draco. They aren't really reptilian. Instead, they're high-dimensional beings that prefer to manifest themselves in this dimension as scary-ass dragon people.
The Draconians themselves did not evolve as a life form in our universe. They were dumped here. They're just a pain. They're incredibly smart, they're incredibly psychic, they're incredible builders, but they're bullies.
They're bullies, and they have a arrogant bully attitude.
Their whole thing is control. Whenever you see one, you ought to just run like hell.
But since they're so crafty, they tend not to battle with the human race directly.
You have the Dracos influencing the president of your country.
Okay, so are we talking Eisenhower, Truman, who we're talking, all of them?
Yeah, all of them.
By the time Eisenhower stepped into office, the draconian system had already infiltrated the 3-letter organizations, and eventually defense-related projects got infiltrated as technology exchanges took place.
In fact, for millennia, they've been able to exert their will over the whole of humanity by working through human or semi-human proxies, usually members of elite families who hold high positions of power.
You have to use the front human form to do it.
Yeah,
because it's too shocking otherwise.
In this
consciousness of the human stream that's here now is so used to just seeing and being told that the human being is at the top of the food chain and we're the rulers of this and that and we're that, it's too shocking to bring in a new species and do it. It's not conducive to keep the control.
Which brings us to the trait that they're most known for.
They have the ability to shift and look like a human.
It's a misconception that they are actually shape-shifting. Some are, but what they're actually doing is altering your visual cortex to make you think you're seeing them that way.
Yes, absolutely, yes.
The shape-shifting is just one of those extra things that makes this story sound so silly for most of us. Normally I would agree, if it weren't for the fact that the reptile changing into human archetype has been with us for quite a while. This too is ever present in our culture today. Has anyone asked why? Why shape-shifting reptiles are everywhere? Even children's shows, like the Dino Squad, which feature shape-shifting teenagers fighting crime. Is it all just a big coincidence? Or are insiders purposely leaking this stuff into the culture? Do they know who's really calling the shots?
The enemy isn't human at all, but it's pushing all our buttons so that we're so busy looking at each other and so neurotic about each other that we're not looking at the real reality here, the real cause, which is another race or races that are here who are totally playing games with us, feeding off our energy and hoping that we destroy ourselves so that they can keep the planet for themselves. Really,
these beings are foreign. They're from another universe, and so for them to be able to be here, they kind of utilize us as a food source and
we say
exist.
they're utilizing us as a food source. Is that as an energetic food source or as a physical? Are they eating
both
humans?
They're carnivorous.
Are you saying carnivorous, they eat humans?
Yes. They won't eat a dead human. It has to be alive at the time of the killing. Their preference is children.
100,000 children totally unaccountable through FBI archives cannot be traced anywhere.
You know, Westchester County, in the last 5 years, 3,000 children in Westchester County, New York, have vanished without a trace. Where are they going?
Nobody's ever seen them. I think they're hauled underneath in some of these bases, and they are summarily done away with, and they are literally eaten.
These children were food. And I'm supposed to just shut up and not say anything about it because people don't want to hear it? That's tough. That's tough.
And yet, this idea is also backed up by thousands of years of artistic depictions of reptiles consuming people. But if this were actually taking place on a large scale, then it might explain some of the strange anomalies with some of these missing person cases.
Every year, hundreds of people are reported missing in national parks and forests, many of them children. But a small percentage of the cases have search and rescue crews continuing to scratch their heads.
The year 1997 set a record for missing persons in the United States, with a staggering number of almost 1 million reported missing, just in that year alone. Now, I'm not saying that all of them wound up as lizard food, but clusters of missing person cases, especially near national parks, are quite bizarre. Former Police Chief David Politis now spends his life trying to get to the bottom of these strange disappearances.
So if there's mental illness, we probably won't touch it. If it's a voluntary disappearance, we won't touch it. If there's evidence of animal or human predation, we won't touch it. And they're either going to find you there, or they're going to find pieces of you there, and they're going to find drag marks there. And then the canines that are brought in are going to be able to track your scent exactly to where the body is.
In Politis' documentary, Missing 411, presents many strange anomalies associated with these cases.
In a lot of these cases, search and rescue, or the volunteers searching people, have already gone over certain areas, not once, not twice, but even dozens of times. And then the child is found there, maybe a year, maybe a few years later.
There's some cases where little kids are alleged to have walked up to 20 miles overnight, or climbed phenomenal heights, 3,000 and 4,000 feet. Those are facts, and it's highly, highly hard to believe.
There are groups within the higher echelon that are actually helping them. That's part of the deal. They won't come up as long as we feed them down there. You understand? It's about human beings selling themselves out.
But is there any evidence of this? Anything to suggest that it's more than just an imaginative horror story? Well, perhaps the next time you're in Oslo, Norway, you should take a stroll through the peaceful Frogner Park. You'll probably notice a statue garden, all designed by famed Swedish sculptor Gustav Winglet, who is best known for designing the Nobel Peace Prize. And perhaps you might notice something unsettling about these statues. Perhaps a message hidden in plain sight. A message that they knew you would never understand the meaning of.
This is where the battle is, between light and dark. You've got the grays over us, you've got the reptilians underneath us, and between us you've got humanity, sandwiched in the middle, wondering what the hell is going on here.
As improbable as it seems, if these whistleblowers, and the many others who tell similar stories are right, then we are pawns in a cosmic game that is played out largely without our knowledge. However, that soon may come to an end, because the world is literally sitting on a powder keg that once it finally blows, will force us to look at everything in a very different way. Centuries after its official discovery, the continent of Antarctica has basically just sat there, with the public at large paying very little interest. However, for anybody willing to look past the official history of Antarctica, you'll find a steady trickle of strange legend and physically documentable evidence that makes Antarctica the prime candidate as a catalyst for widespread disclosure. Since the early 2000s, Rumors of something big going on in Antarctica have been bubbling up on internet chat rooms and forums. Something that believers say is big enough to attract interest among notable names of the world elite. Just days after the heads of the Roman Catholic and Russian Orthodox churches met for the very first time in 1,000 years, Patriarch Kirill of the Russian Orthodox Church went to Antarctica. Officially, it was to bless the land. Even more odd, Secretary of State John Kerry visited Antarctica on the day of the 2016 elections, on arguably the most important day ever for his party. There's also speculation that Obama visited during his trip to Argentina, and many others secretly visited during Nelson Mandela's funeral. Trump sent Newt Gingrich. Prince Harry visited in a PR event for wounded vets. There's also the King and Queen of Spain. Putin expressed interest in going a number of times. 33rd degree Mason and second man on the moon Buzz Aldrin visited, where he had to be medically evac'd after suffering heart issues. But it's not just high-profile figures. Since the mid-2000s, several very large corporations have also drastically increased their interest and investment in the continent, even posting several new job openings for engineers, food, and energy suppliers. However, many conspiracy theorists believe that there was something fishy behind these sudden visits, when the fitness app Strava revealed a heat map of their users' activity based on GPS. An unusually high amount of activity was reported at what would normally be empty and remote locations on the continent. Why would this be? Is there something more that meets the eye going on here? But strange stories coming from the continent are nothing new. Many believe that the Nazis installed secret submarine bases under the ice when they laid claims to large swaths of land just prior to World War II, and moved many of their secret projects there just before Germany fell.
There are large tunnels underneath the water all around Antarctica where the Germans had been taking facilities from Germany to Antarctica, the facilities in Antarctica.
And while hard proof of this is hard to come by, many such believers point to the time that the United States military actually launched an invasion of Antarctica in 1946-47, a year or so after the war ended. Although the mission's stated goal was to establish a research base, what was launched was nothing short of a small invasion armada, a fleet with over 4,700 heavily armed servicemen, and an aircraft carrier with over 30 planes. A bit of overkill just to establish a research station, right? Although the operation failed to reach its objectives, citing bad weather, many believers in the conspiracy claim that the U.S. military actually retreated after suffering huge losses, after being attacked with advanced technology that the Nazis were developing.
Every aircraft we had were eliminated in about 20 minutes. Those ships and all those personnel were sunk. So Admiral Byrd and Admiral Nimitz, with the tail between their legs, took off back to the United States as fast as they could go.
According to conspiracy lore, deals were eventually cut and hostilities cooled as more and more Nazi scientists and intelligence operatives were given key U.S. government positions under Operation Paperclip. Today, much of the continent is under control of the U.S. and Russian militaries, and access is pretty much denied to anyone without military authorization. This includes its airspace to all commercial craft. Even the lucky few who have been given permission to explore the continent recreationally are required to stay in predetermined boundaries, and there have even been claims that some cross-country hikers and skiers have been intercepted at gunpoint for venturing off course. Perhaps they don't want unauthorized visitors to see the many, many strange formations that no doubt litter the ice. Although touted to be a barren land never inhabited by man, there are many cases of intelligent design popping up all over the place. These are especially apparent on Google Earth, where they actually went out of their way to censor random landscape features. And these aren't just stitching errors. Someone clearly had to single out these areas and manually obscure them. Even this one, which looked like a 200-foot wide opening in the earth, before it was eventually blurred out. And who knows how many of these mysterious structures will remain visible until they too are censored before our eyes. Perhaps this will be the next to go. A strange metallic-looking dome covering an opening that goes deep into the earth, with no roads and no other signs of habitation nearby. What the fuck could this thing be? And just what are these signals being shot to and from Antarctica that were picked up by satellites measuring global microwave radiation? It almost looks like some form of microwave warfare. The information coming out of Antarctica is in fact so obvious and so clear that it can't be covered up forever. But whether Antarctica will be the avenue in which larger, more important truths will be disclosed is yet to be known. However, these truths are worth fighting for, because the deeper the secrets kept from us, the further we are from claiming a heritage and a history that is rightfully ours. This is our world, and this is a world that we need to master. Even if it's a world that's more magical and even more scary than you can ever imagine.